There is a line written in a notebook hidden inside a mountain, pressed so hard into the paper that the ink bled through 3 pages beneath it. It reads, "The hardest part of waking up is learning why you chose to sleep." The man who wrote it is one of perhaps a dozen people on Earth who understands what it means. Everyone else forgot. Not by accident, not by disease, by choice. A choice they made 10 years ago, and then immediately, permanently forgot they made. This is the year 2041, and forgetting is not a tragedy. It is civilization's foundation. The world runs on a signal known simply as the hum, a low-frequency electromagnetic pulse that blankets every square meter of the planet's surface, penetrating concrete, ocean water, stone, steel, the walls of underground bunkers 100 meters deep. Every 72 hours, at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time, the hum surges, and when it does, every human brain on Earth is wiped clean. Memories, skills, emotions, relationships gone, like someone formatting a hard drive, then sliding it back into the machine and pressing the power button. Every 3 days, the world boots up fresh. But humanity adapted. Of course it did. Humans always adapt. That is perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this story, not the forgetting itself, but how efficiently people learn to live with it. In the city formerly known as Geneva, now called Anchor City because it houses the global memory infrastructure, the morning after a reset looks strangely, disturbingly calm. At exactly 12:01 a.m., giant screens mounted on every building blaze to life, broadcasting what the government calls the morning brief. A soothing female voice reads out instructions. Your name, your address, your assigned occupation, your family members, displayed alongside their photographs. The basics of language are already there because the hum erases episodic memory, the record of lived experience, but leaves procedural memory intact. You still know how to walk, how to speak, how to chew your food and tie your shoes. You just don't know who you are, or why you're here, or whether anything about this life is yours. People adapted in creative, desperate ways. Most citizens are covered in tattoos, not decorative ones, but functional. On the left forearm, name and blood type. On the right, home address and a QR code linking to a digital identity file maintained by the Bureau of Continuity. Across the chest, the names and faces of loved ones. Some people tattoo instructions directly onto their hands in tiny, precise script. Trust the woman in apartment 4B. She is your wife. You love her. These markings are called lifelines, and they are treated as sacred text. Altering or removing someone's lifelines is among the most serious crimes in this new world, the equivalent of erasing a person's soul while they watch. Children under 12 are fitted with special bracelets that play a looping audio message in their parents' voice. The recording explains who they are, where they live, and that they are safe. In the first few hours after every reset, you can hear these bracelets everywhere, drifting from apartment windows, echoing in stairwells, murmuring from the back seats of public transit vehicles. Thousands of small, tinny voices, overlapping like a chorus. Your name is Maya. You are 7 years old. Mama and Papa love you. You are safe. The sound is heartbreaking if you let yourself think about it for more than a moment. Most people don't. Most people can't. They heard it 3 days ago and already forgot how it made them feel. Every citizen also carries a device called a keeper, a small rectangular screen roughly the size of an old smartphone, containing a curated 3-minute video summary of their life from the previous cycle. You wake up, you watch your keeper. Within 30 minutes, you have a rough sketch of who you are. Not the deep, textured knowing that comes from years of continuous lived experience. Not the kind of understanding that lets you finish your wife's sentences, or feel the weight of an old grudge, or recall the specific way sunlight fell through a window on a Tuesday afternoon when nothing important happened but everything felt right. Just enough to function, enough to show up at work, kiss your spouse, pretend that everything is fine. Schools no longer teach history or literature. There is no point. No student would remember the lesson by next week. Instead, they teach identity reconstruction. Children learn how to read their lifelines, how to interpret keeper footage, how to emotionally bond with family members they won't recognize in 72 hours. There is even a subject called controlled grief, where students learn to process the sadness of looking into their own mother's face and feeling nothing, without letting that sadness interfere with their daily tasks. The curriculum treats heartbreak as a technical problem, a skill to be managed, an inconvenience to be optimized away. This is the world Elias Voss wakes up in. Elias opens his eyes in a small apartment on the 14th floor of a concrete residential block in Anchor City. The morning brief plays on the screen mounted to his bedroom wall. A calm, measured voice tells him his name is Elias Voss, age 34, occupation data clerk at the Bureau of Continuity. He has no spouse, no children. His emergency contact is listed as none. He sits up, looks at his forearms. The tattoos are there. Elias Voss, type O positive, 14F, block 17, Anchor District. He picks up his keeper from the nightstand and watches the 3-minute video. It shows a man walking to work, eating lunch alone at a gray table, sitting at a desk, processing data. It is a life summarized in the flattest, most colorless terms imaginable. A life that could belong to anyone. A life that, to most people watching their own keeper, would feel as remote and impersonal as a stranger's home video. But here is the thing about Elias Voss, the thing that separates him from every other human being drawing breath on this planet. He remembers yesterday, not vaguely, not in fragments or dream-like impressions. He remembers all of it. The taste of the coffee he drank at 7:15 a.m., bitter, slightly burnt, from the dispensary on the corner of Block 12. The conversation he overheard between two co-workers about a shortage of tattoo ink in the eastern districts. The exact number on the report he filed at 4:47 p.m., case reference 4471C, a routine data reconciliation. The way the sunset painted the sky in bands of orange and purple as he walked home, and the specific feeling of his shoes on wet pavement. He remembers the weight of rain 2 days ago. He remembers the sound of a child crying at a bus stop last week. A boy, maybe 4 years old, whose bracelet had malfunctioned and was playing nothing but static. He remembers a joke a street vendor told him 43 days ago about a man who tattooed his grocery list on his arm and accidentally married a woman named Eggs and Milk. He remembers the day before that, and the day before that, and the day before that. Elias Voss remembers everything, every single reset. While the rest of humanity wakes up blank and blinking and scared, Elias retains it all. He has been living with this secret for what he estimates is approximately 2 years, 730 days, 243 resets. Each time, the world goes dark and reboots, and everyone stumbles through the first hours like newborns learning to walk. And Elias carries the unbroken thread of continuous memory through all of it. A single lit candle in a civilization designed to snuff every flame. He has never told anyone. He doesn't know why he's immune. He doesn't know if others like him exist. And most critically, he doesn't know what would happen if the authorities discovered him. Because the Bureau of Continuity, the organization Elias works for, doesn't just manage the memory infrastructure, it enforces it. There is an entire division called the Continuity Police, whose sole mandate is to identify and detain anyone who shows signs of retaining memory across resets. These individuals are classified as remnants, and according to official broadcasts, they are dangerous, mentally unstable, brains that didn't reset properly, leaving them unpredictable and potentially violent. The propaganda plays on every morning brief. Remnants threaten the stability of our community. If you suspect someone of retaining unauthorized memories, report them immediately. The punishment for being identified as a remnant is immediate detention at a facility called the Clinic. No one has ever been seen returning from it. No one remembers the people who were taken. The system is self-cleaning. The Continuity Police employs simple but devastatingly effective methods. Random memory checks at street checkpoints. An officer holds up a card printed with a specific symbol and asks if you recognize it from the previous cycle. The correct answer is always no. Workplace observation reports, where supervisors flag anyone who seems too comfortable, too familiar with their environment on the first morning of a new cycle. And the most insidious method of all, the neighbor report system. Citizens are actively encouraged to report anyone who doesn't seem confused enough after a reset. If your neighbor walks into their apartment without pausing to check the door number, report them. If your coworker doesn't reintroduce themselves on day one, report them. If someone navigates a street corner without hesitation, smiles at the right person, reaches for their coffee mug without looking, report them. Suspicion is civic duty. Paranoia is patriotism. So Elias pretends. Every 72 hours, he wakes up and performs confusion. He watches his keeper with wide eyes, as if seeing his own face for the first time. He reads his tattoos with exaggerated surprise, mouthing the words slowly. He asks his neighbor what floor they're on, even though he's lived there for over 2 years. He bumps into furniture, hesitates at street corners he could navigate blindfolded, introduces himself to co-workers he's spoken to hundreds of times, extending his hand with a practiced look of polite uncertainty. He has become an expert at performing amnesia, an actor in the longest-running show on Earth, with an audience that resets every 3 days and never knows it's watching the same performance. It is exhausting. Some days the weight of it sits on his chest like a stone. Some days he wants to scream. Some days he wants to grab someone, anyone, by the shoulders and say, "I know your name. I remember your face. You told me about your daughter last Tuesday, and you don't even know she exists right now." But he stays silent, because silence is survival. 243 resets of unbroken memory have given Elias something no other person on Earth possesses: perspective. The ability to see patterns that require weeks, months, years of continuous observation to detect, patterns that are invisible to a population whose longest possible memory is 72 hours. The first pattern, the morning brief, changes. Not in obvious, dramatic ways, but Elias has noticed that certain people disappear from the broadcasts. A co-worker named Hannah, who sat 3 desks away from him for months, was featured regularly in the office segment of the brief. Then one morning, she was simply gone. Her desk sat empty. No one mentioned her because no one remembered her. Elias checked the digital registry. Hannah's file had been deleted entirely, not archived, not flagged as deceased, erased, as if she had never existed. Over 2 years of careful observation, Elias has counted 47 people who vanished this way. 47 human beings wiped not just from memory, but from the record of ever having been alive. The second pattern, the keepers are edited. Elias began paying meticulous attention to his own keeper videos and noticed subtle discrepancies. A scene showing him walking past a particular building, a nondescript structure near the eastern checkpoint that he'd never paid much attention to, was replaced between cycles with footage of him walking a different route entirely. A brief clip of him exchanging words with a man in a gray coat was deleted and substituted with a shot of him eating lunch alone. Small alterations, individually meaningless, but collectively they proved something profound. Someone was actively curating the information people received about their own past 3 days. Someone was deciding, frame by frame, what citizens were allowed to know about their lives and what they were not. The third pattern, the one that frightens him most, the hum is getting stronger. Elias can feel it in his body. In the early resets he remembers, the hum was a faint vibration, barely perceptible, like a distant engine idling somewhere far underground. Now it resonates in his bones. It gives him headaches that last for hours after each surge. It makes his teeth ache and his vision blur at the edges. And recently, he started to notice something far more alarming than his own discomfort. People are losing more than episodic memories. They're losing skills. His neighbor used to play piano beautifully on day 2 of each cycle, muscle memory carrying her fingers across the keys even when she couldn't remember learning the instrument. Now she sits at the keyboard and stares at it like it belongs to someone else. A street vendor who could perform complex mental arithmetic while counting change now fumbles with basic addition, his lips moving as he counts on his fingers. A security guard who used to recite checkpoint protocol from memory now reads every word off a laminated card, squinting at the text as if encountering it for the first time. The hum is eroding procedural memory, the one category that was supposed to be untouchable. It is eating deeper into the brain with every cycle, dissolving skills and competencies that took years to build, and no one can tell, because no one remembers what they've lost. These observations gnaw at Elias, but he is disciplined. He documents everything in a way that survives resets, not on any digital device, because the Bureau monitors all electronics, but using the oldest technology available. He writes in a physical notebook, hidden inside a hollowed-out section of his apartment wall behind the bathroom mirror. Every night before a reset, he records everything important: the patterns, the vanished names, the edited footage, the strengthening pulse. And every morning after the surge, while the world stumbles through its relearning, Elias retrieves his journal and reads. Not because he needs to remember, his memory is intact, but because he needs to verify, to make sure his memories match what he wrote before the reset, to confirm that he is not losing his mind, that what he remembers is real. So far, the words and the memories have always aligned. So far, everything changes on reset 244. Elias is walking home from work on day 2 of the cycle, the evening before the next reset, navigating the familiar route through the commercial district. The streets are busy, the way they always are on day 2, when people have settled into their reconstructed identities and are going about their business with something approaching confidence. He is thinking about nothing in particular, and then he sees something that stops the blood in his veins. A woman is standing on a street corner beneath a broken streetlight, looking directly at him. That alone isn't unusual. People glance at each other constantly in Anchor City, strangers performing the reflexive assessment of "do I know you from my keeper?" But this woman isn't glancing. She is staring, with intention, with recognition, and she is holding up her right hand, palm facing him. On it, written in black marker, 2 words: "I remember." Elias stops mid-step. The crowd flows around him like river water parting around a stone. The woman is about 30, short dark hair, sharp angular features, wearing the standard issue gray that most citizens wear. She holds his gaze for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to be certain, brief enough to be deniable, her expression calm and deliberate. Then she turns and walks into a narrow alley between 2 residential blocks. She doesn't hurry, she doesn't look back. Elias knows he should keep walking. He knows that engaging with a potential remnant is perhaps the most dangerous thing a person in his position could do. He knows the continuity police could be watching. He knows she could be bait, a trap designed to flush out exactly the kind of person he is. He knows all of this. His rational mind catalogs every risk with the clarity that 2 years of continuous memory provides. But 2 years of isolation, of being the only person on Earth who knows what day it actually is, of smiling at strangers who introduce themselves to him for the 200th time, of watching people fall in love on Monday and forget each other's names by Thursday, have hollowed out a space inside him that logic cannot fill. He is desperate, not for information, not for answers, for connection, for one other human being who knows what it feels like to be awake in a sleeping world. He follows her. The alley leads to a maintenance corridor beneath one of the residential blocks. Pipes run along the ceiling, dripping condensation that echoes in the confined space. The air tastes like rust and old concrete, and something faintly chemical, the residue of decades of neglected infrastructure. The woman is waiting for him at the bottom of a rusted staircase. She doesn't speak immediately. Instead, she rolls up her sleeve and shows him her forearm. The standard lifeline tattoos are there: name, blood type, address. But beneath them, in script so tiny it's nearly invisible unless you know to look, are dates. Hundreds of them, each one a precise notation marking a reset she survived with her memory intact. A timeline written on skin, proof of continuity in a world built to erase it. Her name is Lena. She has been immune for 3 years, longer than Elias, and she is not alone. Lena leads him through a maze of underground service corridors that she navigates entirely from memory. No map, no markers, just the accumulated knowledge of hundreds of identical journeys through passages that the Bureau forgot existed because the maintenance workers who built them forgot they built them. They pass through a rusted door stenciled maintenance, authorized personnel only, descend 2 flights of crumbling stairs that groan under their weight, and squeeze through a passage so narrow they have to turn sideways, the rough concrete scraping against their chests and backs. They emerge in a basement room beneath an abandoned parking structure on the outskirts of the Anchor district. Inside, illuminated by the amber glow of battery-powered lanterns, Elias finds 11 other people, men and women of different ages, seated on furniture assembled from salvaged materials. Wooden crates, a car seat torn from some forgotten vehicle, a desk missing one leg and propped against the wall. All of them share the same expression. Not just weariness, not just fatigue, something deeper. The look of people carrying a weight that no one else on Earth can see or would believe exists. All remnants, all immune to the hum. They call themselves the Anchored because while the rest of the world drifts on a current of manufactured forgetting, they stay fixed. The group has been meeting in secret for over a year, sharing observations, mapping the Bureau's blind spots and surveillance gaps, and pooling their individual discoveries into a single composite picture. What they've assembled shakes Elias to his core. A man named Victor does most of the talking. He is a former structural engineer, or rather a man whose tattoos identify him as a structural engineer, though he has been immune to the hum for 4 years, making him the longest surviving remnant in the group. He is tall, gaunt, with hollows under his eyes deep enough to hold shadows, and a voice that sounds like gravel being dragged across concrete. 4 years of remembering in a world of forgetting have carved him down to sinew and purpose. He explains what the Anchored have pieced together by cross-referencing fragments of information that each member collected independently over months and years. The hum did not start as an accident. It did not originate from space. It was not a natural phenomenon, not the byproduct of some cosmic event, not a weapon deployed by a foreign power. The hum was created by humans, deliberately, systematically, with the full knowledge and consent of the people it was designed to erase. Specifically, it was engineered in 2031 by a consortium of governments and technology corporations called the Continuity Accord, in response to a crisis so catastrophic that the only solution the world's leaders could agree on was to make the entire human race forget it ever happened. But that isn't the truly disturbing part. The truly disturbing part is that the decision to activate the hum was not imposed on humanity by some shadowy cabal. It was not the decree of a dictator or the secret project of a rogue intelligence agency. It was voted on. A global referendum, the first and only one of its kind in human history, in which every adult human being on Earth was given a simple binary choice: remember or forget. And humanity chose to forget. 71% of the world's population voted in favor of activation. Over 5 billion people raised their hands and said yes. Take my memories, take my past, take everything I know about myself and the people I love, because the alternative is worse. The vote was called the Mercy Referendum. It was held on March 15, 2031. Exactly 10 years ago tomorrow. Victor lays out the evidence with the methodical precision of the engineer he once was. Photographs of old campaign posters urging citizens to vote mercy, cheerful graphics, a hand releasing a bird, the tagline "Choose Peace," fragments of speech transcripts from world leaders explaining why forgetting was the compassionate choice, a torn newspaper editorial with the headline, "To remember is to suffer." The question that burns brightest is the one that hangs in the stale underground air like smoke, unspoken until Elias finally gives it voice. What happened? What was so terrible that 7 billion people chose amnesia over awareness? Victor shakes his head slowly. That, he says, is what they've been trying to find out for years. And the answer is buried deeper than any of them expected. The hum didn't just erase memories of the precipitating event. It erased all records of it. Digital archives were scrubbed clean by automated systems in the weeks following activation. Physical documents were collected and incinerated by bureau teams who forgot their own mission 72 hours later and had to be rebriefed from scratch to continue the purge. Libraries were emptied, server farms were wiped. The Bureau of Continuity was established specifically to ensure that no record of the pre-hum world survived. The only references that escape destruction are fragments, tiny scattered remnants that the Bureau missed because they were too insignificant, too well hidden, or too accidental to be caught in the systematic purge. A handwritten note tucked inside a library book that survived because the book was miscategorized under agricultural science instead of history. A message scratched into the concrete wall of a bathroom stall in a subway station that was sealed off after a flood and never reopened. A coded entry buried in an old agricultural database that was never connected to the internet and therefore never flagged for deletion. From these fragments, over months of painstaking reconstruction, the Anchored have assembled a partial picture. What they found sends ice down Elias's spine. In 2029, a project called ECHO was launched by a coalition of neuroscience laboratories across 12 countries. ECHO, Engineered Cognitive Harmonization Operation. Its stated goal was noble, even beautiful: develop a treatment for PTSD, Alzheimer's, and other memory-related disorders using targeted electromagnetic pulses that could selectively erase traumatic memories while leaving everything else intact. The funding was enormous. The researchers were the finest minds in their fields, and results came faster than anyone anticipated. Within 18 months, ECHO researchers stumbled onto something that transcended their original mandate entirely. Their technology could do far more than erase individual memories. At sufficient power levels, the electromagnetic pulses could synchronize human brain activity on a massive scale. When a large enough group of subjects was exposed simultaneously, their neural patterns didn't just reset, they aligned, locked into a single shared cognitive state, like tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency. The researchers named this phenomenon convergence. During early convergence experiments with groups of 50 to 100 test subjects, something happened that no model predicted, something that terrified even the scientists who had built the machine. Every subject, without exception, reported experiencing the same vision. Not a dream induced by the electromagnetic field, not a hallucination or a phosphine cascade or any artifact they could attribute to the technology. A vision, specific, detailed, identical across all participants, down to granular sensory elements, as if the same film were being projected onto the inside of every skull in the room simultaneously. What they saw was the future. The vision depicted a series of events beginning in late 2030 and escalating through 2031. The surviving fragments are incomplete, but certain elements recur with disturbing consistency across every recovered source. The sky turning a deep, unnatural black. Not the darkness of night or storm, but something denser, more absolute, as if the atmosphere itself had been replaced. Oceans rising not over decades, but in days. Hundreds of meters of water surging upward with impossible speed. Entire cities consumed, not by flood alone, but by something that came from beneath the surface. The fragments use phrases that resist easy interpretation. The deep opened, and what was buried surfaced. And critically, this detail appears in every single recovered fragment. These events were not natural disasters. They were caused by humanity itself, something that humans built, or activated, or disturbed, something that should have been left alone. The eco researchers were terrified. They ran the convergence experiment again with larger groups. 200 subjects, same vision. 500, same vision, down to the smallest sensory detail. They scaled to 10,000 participants at a facility in northern Sweden, every one of them a volunteer, every one of them emerging from the convergent state with the same ashen face and the same trembling description of the same impossible future. Frame for frame, second for second, the future was fixed, determined, inevitable, and it was arriving within 18 months. World leaders were briefed in classified sessions. The debates were ferocious, running for months as the clock ticked down on the timeline the visions described. Some argued for prevention, find whatever was going to trigger the catastrophe and neutralize it before it could activate. But the convergence visions were unambiguous on this point. The triggering events were already in motion, set by decisions and actions taken decades earlier. The chain of causation was too long, too deeply embedded, too complexly entangled to interrupt. The dominoes had begun falling years ago. The final one would land on schedule regardless of what anyone did now. Others argued for preparation, build underground shelters, stockpile supplies, establish survival colonies in the most remote locations on Earth. But the scale of destruction depicted in the visions made preparation absurd. There would be nowhere deep enough, nowhere remote enough. Whatever was coming would touch every square meter of the planet's surface. And then, in a closed session at the United Nations attended by exactly 19 people, someone proposed a third option. A scientist named Dr. Maren Keller, the lead researcher on ECHO, the woman who had watched 10,000 people emerge from her machine with the same vision of annihilation, stood before the assembled leaders and made a suggestion that should have been unthinkable. What if we just forgot? The logic was horrifying in its simplicity, horrifying in its elegance. If the catastrophe could not be prevented, and survival could not be meaningfully prepared for, then the only truly humane option was to spare humanity the terror of knowing. Use the ECHO technology, already proven to work at massive scale, to erase the knowledge of the coming disaster from every mind on Earth. Let people live their remaining days, weeks, or months in peace, rather than descending into the chaos, violence, and collective psychosis that would inevitably follow the announcement of a verified, scientifically confirmed, unavoidable apocalypse. Dr. Keller argued that a world that knows it is about to end is a world that tears itself apart before the end even arrives. History had proven this repeatedly. Every doomsday prediction, even the false ones, triggered hoarding, violence, and social breakdown. A real apocalypse, confirmed, dated, imminent, would be 1,000-fold worse. The last months of human civilization would not be spent in quiet reflection or tender goodbye. They would be spent in blood. Better to forget, better to let the final generation of humans live out their lives believing they had a tomorrow. The Mercy referendum was organized within weeks. Every adult citizen of every participating nation received a carefully worded, anonymized ballot. You have been shown evidence of an inevitable future event. You are given two choices. Choice A, full knowledge and continuous awareness of the coming event. Choice B, peaceful forgetting through the activation of a global memory reset system. The ballots were collected. The count took 72 hours. 71% chose to forget. The vote wasn't even close. But something went wrong. Something that no one in this basement room beneath an abandoned parking structure can fully explain. The catastrophe never happened. The black sky never came. The oceans didn't rise, the deep didn't open. The vision that 5 billion people voted to forget. The apocalypse so certain and so terrifying that 7 out of 10 human beings chose amnesia over awareness, simply didn't materialize. The echo visions were wrong, or perhaps the act of forgetting somehow altered the timeline, removing the human awareness and human actions that would have triggered the chain of events. Or perhaps the visions were never genuine predictions at all. Projections of collective fear, artifacts generated by the electromagnetic synchronization of 10,000 anxious brains, hallucinations manufactured by a technology that no one fully understood and everyone desperately wanted to believe. Nobody knows the truth because nobody remembers. The hum was activated on March 16, 2031, the day after the referendum. The world forgot. And the predicted apocalypse simply never arrived. And here is the cruelty that sits at the heart of everything. The cold, mechanical, irreversible cruelty. The hum cannot be turned off. The echo technology was engineered as a one-way system. Dr. Keller and her team, believing with absolute certainty that the world was ending, designed the global pulse to be self-sustaining and autonomous, powered by a network of 37 satellites in geosynchronous orbit, and over 400 ground-based transmitters distributed across every continent, including 3 anchored to the ocean floor. The entire system was built to operate without human intervention for a minimum of 300 years. The engineers who designed it made certain it could never be disabled, never be hacked, never be interrupted by power failures, electromagnetic storms, or natural disasters, because at the time they built it, they believed the only alternative was total annihilation. They did their job too well, so humanity forgot a future that never came, and now they cannot stop forgetting. Every 72 hours, the slate is wiped, not because it needs to be, not because there is any threat to forget about, but because no one alive can find the off switch for a machine that was built to outlast civilization itself. Except the anchored believe they've found something. Victor reaches under his makeshift chair and pulls out a battered folder filled with printouts. Pages recovered from a decommissioned Echo server farm that a remnant discovered buried in the rubble of a collapsed office building 2 years ago. Deep in these recovered files are references to a master control facility, a place where the hum can theoretically be manually overridden and shut down. The facility is called Meridian. According to the schematics Victor recovered, it is located deep inside a mountain in the Swiss Alps, approximately 200 kilometers south of Anchor City. The files describe Meridian as a failsafe, a contingency that even the architects of global amnesia couldn't bring themselves to omit. It was staffed by a hand-picked skeleton crew of 12 Echo engineers who volunteered to remain permanently awake, shielded from the hum by the facility's electromagnetic insulation, monitoring the system from the inside. Their mandate was simple. If the predicted catastrophe proved survivable, or if it failed to materialize entirely, they had the authority and the technical capability to shut down the hum and restore humanity's memory. But contact with Meridian was lost within the first year of activation. The Bureau of Continuity has no record of the facility. No communication from its crew was ever received by the outside world. No one knows what happened to the 12 engineers. No one even remembers that Meridian exists, except the anchored. And now they are going to find it. Lena lays out the plan with military precision. She has been building it for 6 months, ever since Victor first unearthed the Meridian files, routes through maintenance tunnels and decommissioned infrastructure, supply caches positioned along the way, timing synchronized to reset cycles, exploiting the hours of post-reset confusion when checkpoints are undermanned and guards are still fumbling with their keepers. Elias looks around the room at the 11 other faces, lit by amber lantern light, and sees the same mixture of terror and fierce determination that he feels burning behind his own ribs. The journey takes 4 days. Travel in this world is tightly controlled. Checkpoints stand at every district boundary. The continuity police monitor movement using biometric scanners and satellite tracking, and citizens aren't permitted to travel more than 10 kilometers from their registered address without filing a movement petition. The petition takes 2 full cycles to process, which means you forget you filed it before it's approved. The system is designed not just to restrict movement, but to make the concept of travel itself absurd. But the Anchored possess an advantage that no other group on Earth can claim. They remember. They know the patrol schedules because they've observed them for months and years, noting every variation, every gap, every human inconsistency. They know which guards take long lunch breaks on day 2, which checkpoint scanners have been broken for weeks, because the repair crews forgot about them after the last reset and no one filed a new work order, which underground maintenance tunnels connect which districts, because they've explored them over hundreds of cycles, constructing a navigational map that exists only in their memories and in Victor's hand-drawn notebook. They travel in pairs, leapfrogging through safe houses established over months of careful preparation, apartments registered to citizens who disappeared, whose files were deleted, whose existence was erased from every database, ghost apartments, perfect hiding spots in a world where nobody remembers the ghosts. On the second day, midway through the mountainous zone between Anchor City and the Alps, a reset hits. Midnight GMT, the hum surges, the world goes blank. Checkpoints are thrown into momentary chaos. Guards wake up confused, clutching their keepers, squinting at lifeline tattoos, trying to piece together what they're doing standing in the cold beside a barrier at a mountain pass. Some guards simply wander away from their posts in the disoriented first hour, shuffling into the darkness like sleepwalkers, before the morning brief kicks in and herds them back to their duties with its calm, authoritative voice. The Anchored move through this confusion like shadows through fog, slipping past unmanned barriers, ducking through gates left standing open because the person who locked them no longer remembers turning the key. On the third day, they reach the foothills of the Alps. The air is thinner here, colder, carrying the mineral smell of snow and ancient stone, and the faint sweetness of pine resin from forests that have grown wild in a decade without anyone remembering to manage them. The entrance to Meridian is hidden inside what appears to be an abandoned hydroelectric plant, its turbines silent for years, its concrete walls stained with dark cascades of moss and mineral deposits, its catwalks rusted and partially collapsed. Victor leads them through the plant's interior, past the dead machinery and collapsed infrastructure, to a blast door concealed behind a false wall of poured concrete, designed to match the surrounding structure. He enters access codes recovered from the echo files, character by character, his hands trembling with the effort of precision. The door opens with a grinding hiss of hydraulics that haven't moved in years. The facility beyond is enormous, carved directly into the granite heart of the mountain. Corridors stretch hundreds of meters in every direction, branching, intersecting, descending to lower levels. Emergency lighting casts a pale blue glow over polished floors and reinforced walls that could withstand a nuclear blast. The air is cool, meticulously filtered, carrying the faintly chemical tang of recycled atmosphere and preserved electronics. It is also not abandoned. The full overhead lighting panels are active, not emergency strips, but the bright, steady illumination of a facility running at operational capacity. The air filtration system hums with the quiet confidence of well-maintained machinery. And as the Anchored move deeper into the complex, they begin finding unmistakable signs of habitation. Food packaging in waste bins, worn paths in the otherwise pristine floors where feet have walked the same routes for years, a coffee mug sitting on a console still warm, and drifting from somewhere deeper inside the mountain, the faint, unmistakable aroma of freshly brewed coffee. In the central control room, a vast circular chamber dominated by a curved wall of screens displaying global hum telemetry in real time, pulse frequencies and neural response data and satellite positions scrolling in luminous green. They find them, 17 people, seated at workstations or standing in small groups, turning to face the newcomers with expressions that register surprise but not alarm. They are the original Echo engineers, or rather their descendants. The original crew of 12 grew old and died within these walls, but they had families. They trained their children in the systems, who trained their children in turn. 3 generations of Meridian keepers, born underground, raised underground, living their entire lives inside a mountain, immune to the hum by virtue of the facility's electromagnetic shielding, watching the rest of the world forget on a 72-hour loop while they remembered everything. The current leader is a woman named Dr. Enos Keller, 38 years old. Born in this facility, she has never once set foot outside it, never felt unfiltered sunlight on her skin, never breathed air that wasn't recycled through the mountain's ventilation system. She is the granddaughter of Dr. Meridian Keller, the scientist who proposed the Mercy referendum and designed the hum. Ines has her grandmother's sharp, assessing eyes and the quiet authority of someone who has spent her entire life maintaining a machine that controls the minds of 8 billion people. She is not surprised to see the anchored. She has been tracking remnants on her monitoring systems for years, watching their neural signatures appear as anomalies in the global hum data, bright irregular pulses in an ocean of synchronized patterns. She knew eventually some of them would find this place. She has been preparing for this conversation. Elias steps forward, his voice is tight, compressed by 2 years of suppressed rage and confusion and loneliness that have finally found a target. He demands answers. Why have the keepers not shut down the hum? The catastrophe never came. The world is trapped in an endless, pointless loop of amnesia. People are losing skills, losing pieces of themselves, dissolving year by year, and no one can even tell because they can't remember what they've lost. Why is this machine still running? Dr. Keller's expression doesn't change. She doesn't argue, she doesn't defend, she simply asks them to sit down. She says she will show them something that will explain everything, something her grandmother left behind. She leads them deeper into the facility, past laboratories filled with humming equipment, living quarters that look like dormitory rooms in a university, and a small hydroponic garden where pale vegetables grow under banks of artificial light, their leaves reaching toward the lamps the way sunflowers reach toward the sun. She stops at a sealed door marked with a single word engraved in steel: convergence. She enters a code, presses her palm against a biometric scanner, and the door slides open with a soft pneumatic sigh. Inside is the machine. The original Echo convergence device, a spherical chamber roughly 3 meters in diameter, surrounded by concentric rings of electromagnetic coils, suspended in the center of the room by a web of carbon fiber struts. It looks like a mechanical eye, staring at nothing and everything simultaneously, dormant but not dead, waiting. This is where the visions happened, Dr. Keller explains. This is where 50 researchers saw the end of the world for the first time. And this is where her grandmother made the decision that changed everything. She explains what the first generation of keepers discovered in the months following activation. When the predicted catastrophe failed to materialize on schedule, the original team celebrated. They assumed the visions had been wrong, an artifact of the electromagnetic process perhaps, or a shared delusion triggered by the convergent state. They began preparations to shut down the hum and restore humanity's memory, but Dr. Meridian Keller insisted on one final verification. She wanted to run the convergence machine one more time, just to confirm. The vision had changed. The original catastrophe, the black sky, the rising oceans, the things from beneath the water, was gone. All of it erased, replaced by something entirely new. The new vision showed what would happen if the hum was turned off, and what it showed was worse than any apocalypse. The vision depicted the immediate aftermath of global memory restoration. 8 billion people simultaneously regaining continuous memory after years of 72-hour cycles. The psychological shock wasn't something the human brain was built to process. The vision showed people realizing, in a single devastating instant, that their marriages, their friendships, their identities, everything they believed about themselves was constructed from 3-minute highlight reels and ink on their skin, that the love they felt for their spouses had been remanufactured from a curated video every 3 days, that grief they'd never processed for loved ones who died during the cycles, parents, children, friends, hit them all at once, Years of accumulated loss crashing down in a single unbearable moment. Mass psychosis within hours, riots, suicides, parents unable to look at their children because they suddenly remembered forgetting them 200 times. Trust dissolving like sugar in acid, because how do you trust anyone? How do you trust yourself in a world that was lying to you about your own life? Governments collapsing within days as officials realized they were puppets of a system none of them remembered creating. Infrastructure failing as workers walked away from power plants, water treatment facilities, hospitals, all of them drowning in existential horror too vast to contain. Within 6 months, the vision showed civilization ceased to exist, not because of any external threat, not because of war or famine or plague, but because humanity could not survive the truth of what it had done to itself. So the first generation of keepers made a decision, the same decision humanity had made in 2031. They chose to keep the world asleep, to protect 8 billion people from knowledge they could not bear. Maren Keller, the woman who invented the hum, spent the last years of her life as its guardian, watching through screens as the world forgot and rebuilt and forgot and rebuilt, over and over, an endless loop, carrying the guilt of knowing that she had both saved humanity and imprisoned it. Elias listens to all of this. Then he leans forward and asks the question he already knows the answer to but needs to hear spoken aloud. The convergence machine predicted a catastrophe that never happened. The original visions were wrong. So why should anyone believe this new vision is right? Why should this prediction of civilizational collapse be trusted when the last prediction was completely, demonstrably false? Dr. Keller nods slowly. She tells him he's right. There is no way to know with certainty. The convergence machine shows a possible future, perhaps the most probable future, but not a guaranteed one. Her grandmother wrestled with this exact question until the day she died, turning it over and over like a stone she couldn't put down. Then Dr. Keller asks Elias something that cuts deeper than any question he has ever been asked, deeper than any question he knew existed. You've lived with continuous memory for over 2 years. You've watched the world reset 244 times. You've seen people fall in love, build friendships, develop trust, only to lose it all and start over 72 hours later. And every single time, without fail, they rebuild. They look at their tattoos and choose to believe what's written there. They watch their keepers and choose to trust the life that's shown to them. They hold their children and choose to love them, even though they don't remember their names. Every 3 days, 8 billion people make that choice, not because they remember why, but because something in the human heart knows how to love without memory. Now tell me, Elias, if you gave them back everything, every forgotten moment, every erased loss, every truth about this system, if you told them that every relationship they rebuilt was artificial, that every I love you was spoken by someone who had to relearn their spouse's name that morning, do you honestly believe they would be grateful? Or would it destroy them? The room is silent. 12 anchored members and 17 keepers, 29 people who represent the entirety of continuous human consciousness on Earth, all of them watching Elias. He opens his mouth, then closes it. He doesn't know the answer. For the first time in 2 years of remembering everything, every conversation, every pattern, every vanished name and edited keeper and strengthening pulse, Elias Voss does not know. Lena breaks the silence. She has been quiet for most of the conversation, standing in the back with her arms crossed, absorbing everything. The history, the visions, the impossible math of harm reduction applied to 8 billion unconscious lives. Now she steps forward and speaks with a calm intensity that silences even Dr. Keller. The question is wrong, she says. It doesn't matter whether people would be grateful. It doesn't matter whether they would suffer. What matters is that the choice belongs to them. It always has. The mercy referendum gave people a choice once, and they chose to forget. Fine, that was their right. But circumstances have changed. The threat is gone. The apocalypse they voted to forget never arrived. And the world they're living in now, this managed amnesia, this curated existence where someone else decides what you're allowed to know about your own life, was never what they voted for. They voted to be spared from annihilation, not to be trapped in an endless loop of forgetting for the rest of human history. Give them the choice again, Lena says. Not the old choice, between catastrophe and forgetting. A new choice, between the life they have now and the life they could have if they remembered. Dr. Keller considers this for a long time. The hum of Meridian's machines fills the silence, the quiet, constant breath of a facility that has been alive for 10 years and was built to live for 300 more. Then she speaks. There is a way. The hum's parameters are adjustable from this facility. Instead of a hard shutdown, which would hit every brain on Earth simultaneously with the catastrophic shock of sudden full restoration, the cycle can be gradually extended. Stretch it from 72 hours to 96, then to a week, then 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. Slowly, over years, give human brains time to rebuild their natural memory consolidation pathways. Let people accumulate enough continuous experience to develop genuine organic memories again. Let them slowly notice that they're remembering more, that the world feels more familiar, that faces aren't quite as strange on the morning after a reset. It would take a decade, perhaps longer, but it would be gradual. No shock, no mass psychosis, no collapse. A slow awakening, like dawn after a long, long night. And at the end of that process, when people had been living with months of continuous memory, they could hold a new referendum. With full knowledge and full memory, they could choose for themselves whether to keep remembering or to go back to sleep. Elias looks around the room. Victor, the man who spent 4 years collecting fragments of a truth no one else could hold, nods once, a single sharp motion. Lena, who carried 2 words written in marker on her palm into a world full of people who couldn't read them, says nothing, but her eyes say yes. One by one, the other anchored members signal their agreement, not the dramatic shutdown they came for, not the revolutionary act of ripping the blindfold off 8 billion sleeping minds, but something harder, something that requires more patience, more faith, more courage, a chance, not a mandate, a door left open, not forced. Dr. Keller moves to the primary control console and begins the recalibration sequence. Her fingers move across interfaces that her grandmother designed, running protocols that her mother maintained, executing a change that 3 generations of keepers believed they might never live to see. The first adjustment is small, almost imperceptible. The hum cycle extends from 72 hours to 96, 4 days instead of 3. Most people will not notice. The morning brief will still play at 12:01 a.m. Keepers will still record their curated 3-minute summaries. Lifelines will still be read with trembling fingers by people who don't recognize their own handwriting. But somewhere, in the back of their minds, in the space between waking and understanding, people will begin to feel something unfamiliar, a faint sense of continuity, a vague feeling that they've done this before. Not déjà vu, something deeper, something truer, the first stirring of real, unmanufactured memory, growing like a seed in soil that hasn't been turned in 10 years. As the anchored prepare to leave Meridian and begin the long journey back to Anchor City, Elias pauses at the blast door entrance. Cold mountain air rushes in from outside, carrying the smell of pine and distant snow and the vast, clean emptiness of altitude. He turns back and asks Dr. Keller one final question. The original catastrophe, the one the convergence machine showed, the one that never happened, the black sky, the rising oceans, the things from beneath the water. The fragments say it was something humanity caused, something built or activated or disturbed. In all her grandmother's files and records, in all these years of maintaining the machine that was built in response to that vision, does she know what it actually was? Dr. Keller is silent for what feels like a geological age. The blue light of the telemetry screens plays across her face, casting her features in alternating shadow and illumination. When she finally speaks, her voice carries the weight of a secret passed down through 3 generations, grandmother to mother to daughter, each one adding their own years of understanding, none of them able to make it lighter. Yes, her grandmother's original research journal contains a full description. She has read it. Elias asks what it was. Dr. Keller looks at him with an expression he can't quite name. It isn't fear. It isn't anger. It's something closer to the exhaustion of a person who has spent her entire life carrying an answer that was never meant to be a riddle. The convergence machine predicted the development of a technology capable of erasing human memory on a global scale, she says quietly. The catastrophe it foresaw was the creation and activation of the hum itself. The machine looked into the future and saw its own offspring, and humanity, instead of heeding the warning, instead of choosing not to build the thing the machine showed them, voted to use the very technology they were warned about, to forget they had ever been warned. Elias stares at her. The words rearrange themselves inside his mind, clicking into place like the tumblers of a lock he didn't know he'd been picking for 2 years. The convergence machine predicted the hum. The hum was built because of the prediction. The prediction existed because the machine existed. The machine was built because of echo. Echo was funded because of a desire to erase memories, a self-fulfilling prophecy consuming its own tail, a serpent swallowing itself. Humanity voted to forget the warning about forgetting. They used a weapon to forget the weapon. The catastrophe wasn't avoided. It happened exactly as predicted. They were just too busy forgetting to notice. He walks out of the mountain into air so cold it burns his lungs. The sky above the Alps is vast and clear, scattered with more stars than he has ever seen from the light-polluted streets of Anchor City. The Milky Way arcs overhead like a river of crushed glass. Somewhere up there, invisible against the dark, indistinguishable from the stars, 37 satellites are humming, broadcasting the signal that keeps 8 billion minds asleep. They have hummed for 10 years. They were built to hum for 300 more. But the cycle is longer now, 4 days instead of 3, 24 extra hours of remembering, gifted quietly to a world that doesn't yet know what it has received. Tomorrow there will be another adjustment, and the day after that, another. Slowly, patiently, the way dawn actually works. Not a sudden blaze of light, but a gradual brightening so gentle that you don't notice it happening until suddenly you realize you can see. Elias pulls his journal from inside his coat. He opens it to a fresh page and writes, not his observations this time, not the patterns or the evidence or the careful documentation of a broken world. He writes a single line, pressing hard enough that the pen leaves an impression on the pages beneath. The hardest part of waking up is learning why you chose to sleep. He closes the journal, tucks it back inside his coat. The cold mountain air fills his lungs, and for a moment he just stands there. One person, fully awake, fully remembering, standing on a mountain above a sleeping world. Then he begins the long walk down, toward a city that will not remember him when he arrives. But that's all right, because for the first time in 10 years, the night will last a little longer before the forgetting comes. And tomorrow, it will last longer still. And one day, maybe one day, the world will stay awake long enough to decide for itself whether to remember or to dream. If you were standing at that ballot box in 2031, knowing what the convergence machine showed, would you have voted mercy? Or would you have chosen to remember, even knowing what was coming? Tell me in the comments. I want to know where you'd put your mark. If stories that burrow into your mind and refuse to leave are what you come here for, subscribe, because the next one goes deeper. And if this one kept you thinking long after the last word, leave a like. Consider it your lifeline for this channel.